Truth and Transcendence, brought to you by Being Space with Catherine Llewellyn. Truth and Transcendence, episode 187. Welcome back. What is it that we believe could happen that will make us unhappy? I had a conversation the other day with somebody who has a condition, a brain condition. And she said the worst part of this brain condition was when she was worried about the fact that it would probably ruin her life. So she learned about the condition, and then she went through a very difficult period of time, being very concerned and anxious and upset about what she thought this condition was going to do to her. And she then kind of went through a shift where she said to herself, does this actually have to make me unhappy? Does this actually have to ruin my life? And in that moment, she realized that it didn't have to ruin her life. That although there was going to be a certain amount of deterioration and falling to bits going on for her, that she could potentially still be happy, and that the process of being terrified that it would make her unhappy was what was currently ruining her life in that moment. And when she let go of that, she was able to come back into the present and realize that by continuously committing herself to being in present, she could still live a happy life for as long as she does. And then if it does reach a point where the whole thing is miserable, that will happen then, but she's not borrowing it from the future. She's not bringing that forward into the present. This struck me very deeply. It struck me as a very wise perspective that this person had actually come across for herself. I also thought it was very relevant, very useful, and I was really inspired by it. And I think there was a part of me that felt, am I doing that in my life? Am I imagining that there's something that could happen? And am I fearing that thing happening because I believe that if it does happen, it's going to make me unhappy, ruin my life? And at the moment, I don't have that going on with me. But I do know I have experienced that in the past. And I do know other people have, people who I know. So examples that I'm aware of are someone is terrified of losing all their money because they think that will ruin their life. Or they're terrified of losing their health because they think that will ruin their life. Or terrified of losing a particular relationship, or certain possessions, or a friendship, or a job, or a piece of status. Even something like a membership of a club. I was a member of the Soho Club for a while, which is quite an expensive club. It's not the most expensive, it's quite expensive. They have these beautiful locations all over the UK, all over the world, actually. But I only went to some of them in the UK. And of course, you walk in there and everyone else is a member of the club. So there are certain things you know are going to be true about everybody there, which is, at the very least, they can afford the membership of the club, and they've got the time and the space and the imagination to join and to show up and hang out there. So it's a kind of slightly rarefied demographic to begin with. There's no guarantee that they're going to be a nice person or a clever person or an interesting person, but there's something about it. There's something about being a member of the club. And then there came a point in time when I was, tightening my belt, reducing my costs, and I realized I was going to have to let go of that particular membership. And there was a fear of loss that I experienced. There was a fear of losing some sort of special thing that I associated with that club. And I reflected on that, and I realized that actually the things I most appreciated about that club were things I could have anytime I wanted in my own living room or in my friend's living room, or just by going to a beautiful hotel somewhere or a beautiful restaurant somewhere. It wasn't necessary to be part of this particular club. But of course, the illusion that many of us members had was that this particular experience was inherent only to that particular club. Now, that's just one example of ways that we project onto things source of happiness for us. So the lady I mentioned before, she had a belief, which I think many of us have, which is that if something's weird is happening with your brain, or when I say weird, something the medical establishment told her was weird. And she actually acknowledged during the conversation, they don't even understand what it is that they saw on the scan, and they don't know what it means. So it might actually mean absolutely nothing, and it might be that there's no problem whatsoever. And yet, we've all got this capacity to project onto certain circumstances, situations, relationships, diagnoses, in the case of a health matter, a source of unhappiness, a removal of happiness. Now, I think that this particular dynamic that we have, this particular thing that we're capable of doing, like all of these things, it has pros and cons. And the pros of it is it means that we can look outside and say, that particular thing might make me unhappy. How do I get away from it? How do I ameliorate it? How do I cater for it? How do I work around it rather than just sit there being punished? But the downside of it is that we're giving away our power, potentially. We are giving our power to be happy to something outside of us, to some other factor. Now, of course, our brain is not outside of us, it's part of our body, but it is outside of the self, it's outside of the spirit. So the minute we start to say, right, if that happens, that will make us unhappy, we are giving our power to that thing. And we are also doing something which I think many of us know about now, is we're using the power of our words to bring about an outcome. So if that happens, that will make me unhappy. Guess what? If it happens, we are unhappy because we said so, because we said that was what was going to happen. I was selling an apartment in Somerset before I moved to where I am now. Lovely apartment, very spacious. And several couples came to look at it. This particular couple, they looked hale, healthy. They were perfectly capable of moving around, walking around. And they said, no, we can't buy this flat because it doesn't have a walk-in wet room. When we get older, we're not going to be able to climb in and out of the bath. Now, on the one hand, they were probably just making an excuse. They probably just didn't want the flat, and that was an excuse I couldn't argue with. On the other hand, I thought, why tell yourself that you are going to reach a point where you will not be able to get in and out of the bath? Why tell yourself that? Why assume that that's going to happen? And also, why assume that if that does happen, that it's going to be depressing? Because they were very kind of low about this. They go, we're getting on now, we won't be able to move around as well soon. It's all going to get very sad, And it was almost like they were going to bring that about almost unconsciously, purely through that particular approach. So I think if we look at our lives, look at what you have in your life, which elements of your life, if that element went away, do you think would make you unhappy? And because of that, do you have a fear of that thing going away in your life, whether it's a relationship, a situation, a work thing, health, whatever it might be? Do you fear losing the things that you think will make you unhappy if you lose them? And if that's the case, how much energy is going into that fear? How much attention is going into that? Or how much energy on a subconscious level might be going into that without even thinking about it or realizing it? And could that be perhaps questioned a bit? Could it be questioned? What if all the things you have in your life could disappear and you could still be happy? I don't mean lying about grief. I'm talking about, and you could still find your way back to being happy. I went to visit my very elderly aunt, and she had actually called and left a message on my phone inviting me to visit her, which was lovely. I mean, we were not particularly close. Anyway, so she left me this message. So I rang the home that she lives in and spoke to the staff there and said, look, I've had this message on my phone from my aunt. Come and visit. They went, oh, okay, fine. I said, can I come visit? We arranged a time. I showed up. She was out walking on the grass with one of those frame things. She was completely bent over in the middle like an L shape. And she was walking with this frame out on the grass. And the staff said, oh, she's out walking. She does this walk 3 times a day. Fantastic. Marvelous of her, I thought. Anyway, so I sort of wandered over to her. It was beautiful summer, sunshine. Said, hello. She said, oh, hello. And just started chatting with me. And I said, do you know who I am? She said, no, I don't, actually. I said, oh, I'm your niece. I'm Catherine. Oh, she completely had no idea who that was. And I said, I'm Anne's daughter. Oh, Anne's daughter. How lovely to meet you. She was convinced she'd never met me before. And of course, she had met me many times. But she was very happy. She was absolutely content. She had no worries or upset. So we started chatting away and I was asking about her life. And she said, of course, this memory thing is just ghastly. I've lost this memory thing. It's just inconvenient, but it's not really a bother. I just do my walking. And she said, I'm writing poetry still. And it was just a delight to see this woman not buying into me losing my memory means I have to be unhappy. And there was another example of this at lunch. I had lunch with her and a group of other people who were living there. They were all elderly people who were living there. And I said, what's that flag on the wall? There was a big flag on the wall. It was white with a red cross, which I think, I don't know, it's the flag for England, possibly, as opposed to, it's not the British flag. I think it might be the English flag, white background and a red cross. I said, what's that flag doing there? They said, we don't know. I said, oh, is anyone else? They said, there's no point us finding out, but because by the time we come down the following morning, we'll have forgotten. And they all burst out into uproarious laughter. They just thought this was the best joke ever, that they were losing their memories and it just didn't matter. That stayed with me. This was years and years ago that this occurred. That stayed with me. And I thought, how many things do we believe are necessary for us to be happy, for us to lead a good life? And to what extent does our fear of losing those things in the belief that the loss of them will make us unhappy? How much energy goes into those fears? How desperately do we hang on to things that we think if we lose them, we'll be unhappy? Because we might not be. We don't have to be. But if we say that we will be, then for sure we will be. So I wish you a wonderful week of happiness. And if you notice yourself hanging on to something or fearing losing something because you believe the loss of it will make you unhappy, then my suggestion is question that. Maybe pour a bit less energy into that fear. Enjoy it while it's there. Be grateful for it while it's there. And know that you have the capacity for happiness without that thing, that person, that situation. What if you have the capacity for happiness notwithstanding? And what if it's okay to know that without in any way being disloyal to anyone, anything you're involved with? So thank you for listening and thank you for watching. I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Truth and Transcendence, and thank you for supporting the show by rating, reviewing, subscribing, buying me a coffee and telling a friend. If you'd like to know more about my work, you can find out about transformational coaching, Peloa, and the Freedom of Spirit workshop on beingspace.world. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.